Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com recruiting analyst, football analyst, also co-host with the Bearcast with Craig on Tuesdays, joins us every Friday at this time. Grayson, okay, coaches are out. That's one story. Baylor trying to finalize their roster with one or two spots left. That's a story. And your thoughts about what is right now the priority? Is it finishing up the 85 scholarships? And obviously they're on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering where y'all were going to start this week because it just feels like we have so much to talk about just because of the huge weekend last weekend, you know, with the transfers coming on campus and obviously the momentum Baylor has built over the last week just in the transfer portal. So that's one thing, like you talked about. Of course, coaches just got out on the road today, so we're going to see that over the next 2 weeks. And Baylor has their junior day now scheduled for the end of January. Their, day of champions, when the NFC championship and the AFC championship games are going on in the NFL, they'll be having their junior day to watch that and get a lot of their 2024 prospects on campus. But yeah, I think the biggest priority right now is filling out those last couple spots, making sure that you're going into the spring with a roster that you feel really comfortable with and confident about, and making sure that every position is as full as you need it to be going into the spring. And I think they've done a really nice job of that. I think they still have a couple more spots left and just a few days to figure those out. But I think they have a pretty good idea of what the roster that they have going into the spring. And now they have at least two quarterbacks inside the quarterback room, potentially a third. We'll see if they're able to land another or if they elect to use that spot elsewhere. But I think they feel a lot more confident now than they probably did a week ago. And I think they were always confident, but from a fan's perspective, I think, fans are starting to come around and be like, oh, now everything's fine. They have the quarterback situation figured out. They have a lot of other positions figured out as well. And I think once that all comes together, it makes you really confident and really excited for spring football to start.
Yeah, whether it's this weekend or after spring, they're going to add a third scholarship quarterback, you would think, Grayson, no matter what, because you got to have three. And so there'll be options there. I'm sure they'd like to go in with three. How many spots do you think they have? 3, 4, less than that?
Right. So I'll start with the quarterback spot because there is still a name out there who visited this past weekend, Tristan Gebbia, who is the Oregon State quarterback. He would actually be playing his 7th year if he ended up at Baylor, but would give them a nice veteran piece who, if you went back and watched him, he was actually really good for stretches at Oregon State, had a really unfortunate injury in the 2020 season against Oregon, just really unlucky, got pulled out of a pile and actually tore his hamstring and then had to sit out the entire 2021 season. So he's still a pretty capable quarterback, and he's still on Baylor's radar. Now, as far as spots go, I actually think the number is 2. I think they have 2 spots going into spring as far as full scholarships go. And so obviously, Gebbia is a guy that, who knows, maybe they use a spot there or maybe they save a spot. And then that other spot, it just seems like that other spot's going to be used on the cornerback position. They've offered quite a few out of the transfer portal. I actually think it's the position they've sent out the most offers for. But they haven't really hit outside of Isaiah Dunston, who was on the official visit this past weekend. So they got one, but I think they'd like to have one more going into spring. We'll see if that ends up being true or not. But obviously the offer to Gabe Judy, we're kind of waiting to see what he's going to do. I think Tennessee's made up some ground in that department. And then they've kind of been looking other directions as well, but I don't think they've found another guy quite yet.
Grayson, your thoughts on Squirrel Williams entering the transfer portal?
Right. I mean, I think it's one of those things where this was going to be his COVID year. And we can sit here and talk about Squirrel's career quite a bit. He might even have more years left than we're even anticipating. But he's a grad transfer now. And I think for Baylor, you look at their depth chart and the guys that they have in that room at the running back position, they still have Richard Reese, who had a great year this year. They added Dominic Richardson, the Oklahoma State running back, who I know they feel really confident about being more of a power back who can kind of take over that Abram Smith role from 2021 and kind of take over the role they didn't have last year, because once Tay McWilliams got hurt, they kind of had to mix and match guys. And I know Quaylen is a bigger bodied running back, but I think they really needed more there. They needed another guy in the room there. And I think Dominic Richardson fills that. Obviously, Quaylen is still back as well. So I think you got to feel pretty good about the running back position, even if Squirrel, is not going to be there since he entered the transfer portal today.
Grayson, Juice Johnson to Texas Tech, and then, of course, Matt Rule in Lincoln, who recruited Squirrel Williams. Do you feel like there's any connection to that where he might end up, or is that just obvious but not the case?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. Once Squirrel entered the portal, I haven't really talked to him about it too much because, once guys aren't at Baylor anymore, it's a little bit tough for me to start tracking too many things outside of that just because my focus is pretty much always on Baylor recruits and things like that. So I'm not really sure, but I will tell you this, I'm really excited for him wherever he goes. I've never heard anything but great things about Squirrel, and I know throughout his career it was really tough to watch him deal with these injuries and have to continue to battle and fight back. And then this past year, he finally had moments where he looked healthy. It wasn't the whole year, but at least he had moments where he did, consistent moments, and he never sustained any big long-term injuries. So I was really happy about that, and I hope wherever he goes, he has a lot of success, as long as it's not against Baylor, of course.
So he just mentioned a name that was also in the headlines this week, Juice Johnson, Justin Johnson, Baylor running backs coach, headed to Lubbock to be like associate head coach or assistant head coach, whatever the exact title is, along with wide receivers coach, Grayson. And so how impactful is that for the Bears and Dave Aranda on the recruiting trail, and team-wise, how do you view that?
He's a really good coach, and he's a coach that, again, another one that I've heard great things about. I've gotten to meet Juice in person. Great guy. I think he's going to do good things at Tech, and I think he's a very good coach, and he's also a very good recruiter. So I think Baylor now is just going to have to search for a guy to replace him as far as recruiting-wise goes. I think that's a big piece of the puzzle, and obviously, he's going to have to coach the running back position as well and try to develop a group that, while they have experience there, they also have some young guys that I think are really intriguing, and I think are guys that could be really, really good in the future if they're developed properly. When you think about guys like Bryson Washington and Kyan Roberts-Day, and when Dawson Pendergrass gets on campus, you throw those guys in the mix to go along with your Richard Reese, Jordan Jenkins, Dom Richardson, Quaylen, Tay McWilliams, guys like that. I think it's a very solid room. So whoever they hire, I think, is going to have a nice mixture of young talent to develop and older guys to rely on early on when he gets to Baylor. So I think recruiting is going to be a big emphasis in my eyes with whoever they hire here, because Juice was a very good recruiter on the staff.
Grayson, you mentioned that there are, 2 spots available on the scholarship roster. And if the quarterback comes in from Oregon State or whoever it is, that's one. What position then is priority one to fill with the other?
Right. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, it just feels like defensive back or cornerback has to be addressed, or is a position they want to be addressed. I just say that based on the amount of offers that they've sent out to that position. It just seems like they want another defensive back. Preferably, it seems like a cornerback addition to the room. We'll see if that happens. Obviously, a big part of that is finding the right fit. And I don't know that Baylor's found the right fit quite yet. And obviously, potentially missing on Gabe Judy, the BYU transfer who visited this past weekend. It seems like he's trending towards Tennessee, so he's the guy who could be out of the equation. Now it's kind of, will Baylor find another guy? Will they leave that spot empty? Will they take a best available? That's to be determined, I think, at this point.
Grayson, the transfer portal closes on Sunday, and then when does it open up again, and how does all that work? So if a player doesn't enter it by Sunday, he can't enter until when? Unless he's a grad transfer, until when?
Yeah, that wouldn't occur until, I think it's sometime in the spring, and then you can't enroll until the summer. So then you become, you don't get to do spring football and things like that. I'm not sure on the exact date in the spring, but it's sometime in there, and then it opens a pretty big window where guys can commit, or I guess in the transfer portal, it's pretty much you just commit and then you enroll on campus. And so I think that's going to be more so for that second wave, and that'll again happen more so in the summer when guys enroll for summer ball, which of course leads into fall camp in August.
Good luck tracking it all down. I know you will. Grayson Grundhoefer right now with the story running thread in the premium section, Baylor attrition and addition when it comes to the transfer portal, those in and out, and, of course, just the fact that coaches are all on the road, among many other stories. Grayson Grundhoefer with us on Fridays, 3-4.